Why did the laughter stop the moment she set the rifle case down? It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just a dull thud against concrete, old leather, scarred wood, metal that had seen decades instead of months. Sergeant Derek Mason didn't even look at her face at first. His eyes went straight to the rifle slung over her shoulder, and his mouth curled before his brain caught up. Get that piece of junk off my range before it explodes in your face. The words cracked through the cold Colorado morning, sharp enough to draw every head on the firing line. Soldiers turned, some smirked, some whispered, a few laughed openly. She stood still. The rifle looked wrong here. Ancient. A Mosin Nagant with a stock worn smooth by hands long gone, its metal dulled by time instead of neglect. It didn't belong beside the sleek, black precision rifles resting on bipods like polished instruments. "Ma'am," Mason continued, stepping closer now, voice rising so everyone could hear, "this is a precision shooting facility, not a museum." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she lowered the rifle case to the ground with careful hands, not hurried, not defensive. Measured, controlled, like someone who knew exactly how much space she occupied. "I have authorization," she said quietly. Her accent caught a few ears. Not local, not quite Russian, something older, something weathered. Mason snatched the day pass from her hand, glanced at it for half a second, then let it flutter to the ground like trash. "Authorization or not," he said loudly, "you're a safety hazard. Take your garage sale special and leave." The humiliation landed heavy. Public intentional. Private Alina Ross watched from near the ammo shed, something tightening in her chest. The woman didn't flinch. Her breathing didn't change. Her shoulders didn't rise. That wasn't how people reacted when they were embarrassed. That was how people reacted when they were waiting. The morning sun caught the left side of her face as she bent to retrieve the pass. Burned scars traced her skin in pale, uneven lines, disappearing beneath the collar of her worn field jacket. The damage was old, deep, the kind that rewired nerves and lives. Mason saw it too. Something flickered across his face, not pity, not shame, unease. "Look at this," he called to the others, forcing the moment back into his control. "Someone's grandmother thinks she can play soldier." Laughter rippled again, but it wasn't as confident this time. She straightened slowly. "I've paid for range time," she said. "I'd like to use it." Mason stepped closer, invading her space, breath heavy with coffee and authority. "That rifle hasn't been field-worthy since Kennedy was president." "The rifle is maintained," she replied. "It will shoot." Staff Sergeant Rita Chen emerged from the range office, clipboard already raised like a shield. "Civilian time doesn't start until 1400. You'll need to clear the area." The woman didn't move. Instead, she knelt. That's when Ross noticed it, the way her hands moved. Not tentative, not unfamiliar. Every latch released with quiet precision. The rifle lifted from its case like something sacred. Her breathing shifted. 4 counts in. 7 held. 8 out. Ross had learned that pattern in advanced marksmanship training. Mason noticed something too. His voice wavered just slightly. "Put it away." The woman rose, rifle held low, not threatening, not careless. "Correct." "1 magazine," she said, finally meeting his eyes. "Then I'll leave." The challenge hung between them. Mason couldn't back down. Not with 30 soldiers watching. Not with his reputation balanced on mockery. "Fine," he snapped. 5 rounds, 100 yards. When you miss, you're gone." From the observation tower, Colonel James Mitchell lowered his binoculars. His arthritis flared, but his hands were steady. He'd been waiting 8 years for this ghost to reappear. The woman walked to the firing line with unhurried steps, every foot placement deliberate. The crowd quieted without realizing why. She settled into prone. The rifle fit her shoulder like memory. She didn't touch the wind meters, she watched the grass, the shadows, the space between movements. The first shot cracked the air deeper than the others, older. A pause. Impact. Dead center. Lucky, Mason muttered. The second shot came. Same hole. Silence fell hard now. By the third, no one laughed. By the fourth, no one breathed. 5 rounds, 1 ragged hole. Iron sights. 300 yards. The range felt suddenly smaller, like it was holding its breath. She rose, calm as still water. Mason's face had drained of color. From the tower, Mitchell was already moving, phone pressed to his ear. "She's here," he said quietly. The woman shouldered her rifle. And for the first time that morning, the soldiers weren't looking at the weapon. They were looking at her. Because some things don't announce themselves. They reveal themselves only when underestimated. Why did no one speak after the targets were reeled back? Not because they didn't know what to say, but because saying anything would break whatever fragile order still existed on that range. The paper told the truth before anyone dared to look at her again. 5 rounds, 1 hole. The kind of grouping instructors talked about in hypotheticals, the kind used in lectures to explain limits, not to demonstrate reality. Sergeant Mason swallowed hard. "Reset the targets," he said too quickly, voice cracking just enough to betray him. 300 yards, let's see how long the luck lasts. No one laughed this time. Vera, though no one knew her name yet, didn't answer. She was already kneeling again, adjusting her position with minute corrections no one else would notice. Her scarred cheek settled against the stock, not gently, not harshly. Familiar, like coming home to something that never asked questions. Private Ross felt her pulse hammering in her ears. She'd trained with national-level shooters. She'd watched records break on pristine ranges with perfect equipment. This was different. This was quiet. The wind shifted, subtle, deceptive. Grass bowed, then rose again, creating pockets of movement most shooters would ignore. Vera didn't. Her eyes traced invisible corridors through the air, measuring patience instead of speed. Behind her, Mason rubbed at the old scar on his wrist. He couldn't remember when he'd started doing that. Kandahar, maybe, or before. The rifle barked again. Then again. And again. The spotters froze. "Same hole," one whispered, disbelief shaking his voice. Chen lowered her clipboard. She wasn't writing anymore. By the 5th shot, the range had become something else entirely. Not a training facility, not a proving ground. A confession booth. Vera rose slowly, clearing the rifle, movements deliberate, respectful. She didn't look at the targets. She didn't need to. Mason stepped forward, his authority fraying at the edges. 600, he said abruptly, too abruptly. Real distance, real conditions. That did it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. 600 yards with iron sights wasn't a challenge, it was a trap, a way to reclaim control by invoking physics. Vera studied him for a long moment. In that silence, something old surfaced in Mason's eyes. Recognition. Not vague. Specific. "You died," he said before he could stop himself. The words landed wrong. Colonel Mitchell's footsteps echoed across the concrete as he descended from the tower. Each step measured, controlled. He'd imagined this moment more times than he could count, always ending differently. Vera tilted her head slightly. 600, she said, same target. The wind rose as if in response, gusting now, erratic and unforgiving. Any instructor would have shut the range down. No one did. Because everyone understood now, this wasn't about shooting. This was about truth that had waited too long. Vera lay prone again, her breathing settling into that same controlled rhythm. 4, 7, 8. Her scarred fingers found the trigger's breaking point, the place where intention became inevitability. The first shot landed. Dead center. A sound escaped someone in the crowd, not applause, not a cheer. A gasp. The second followed. Then the third. By the fifth, Mason was backing away, shaking his head. "No," he whispered. "You're dead," the report said. "That report lied," Mitchell said calmly, stepping fully into view now. "Just like you did." 30 rifles came up instinctively, not aimed at Vera, but at Mason. The range shifted again. From witness to reckoning. Mason's hand drifted toward his sidearm. A reflex. One that earned him a dozen shouted warnings and a pair of MPs moving in fast. "You survived," he said, voice cracking now. "No one survives that." Vera stood, dusting her knees, her expression unreadable. "3 did," she said quietly, "because I stayed." Private Kim pushed through the crowd, her face pale, eyes shining with something fragile and desperate. "My brother," she whispered. "David Kim, he was there." Vera's composure fractured just slightly. "He was brave," she said. "Braver than anyone should have to be." The words broke something open. Mitchell held up a tablet, its screen glowing with numbers Mason recognized instantly. $2 million, Mitchell said, deposited the morning of the ambush. Care to explain? Mason's knees buckled. The truth spilled fast after that, not because he wanted to confess, but because there was nowhere left to hide. Changed frequencies, delayed response, sold certainty for money. The wind died as if listening. When the cuff snapped shut, no one cheered. Justice didn't feel triumphant. It felt heavy. Vera packed her rifle carefully, reverently. The Mosin settled into its case like something finally allowed to rest. Mitchell approached her, voice softer now. "The Army owes you more than an apology." "No," she said, "it owes them the truth." She handed Kim a small notebook, worn and stained. "He wrote to you," Vera said, "didn't finish." Kim clutched it like a lifeline. As Vera turned toward her truck, 3 men stepped out of the crowd. Older, worn, alive. The ones she'd burned for. They didn't speak at first. They didn't need to. Sometimes survival doesn't shout. Sometimes it stands quietly on a range, holding an old rifle everyone laughed at, until it reminded them what dignity looks like when it finally fires back. Why did she hesitate before opening the truck door? It wasn't fear. It wasn't doubt. It was the weight of something unfinished pressing against her spine, like a familiar hand. The range behind her buzzed now, radios crackling, boots moving, authority reasserting itself after shock. Mason was gone, escorted away with his head bowed and his mouth finally silent. The machinery of consequence had engaged, loud and clumsy compared to the precision that had brought it here. Vera stood still. The old rifle rested in its case against her leg, heavier now than it had been an hour earlier. Not because of steel or wood, but because it had spoken again, loud enough that lies had nowhere left to hide. "Vera." The sound of her name stopped her. She turned slowly. 3 men stood a few yards away, uncertain in a way soldiers rarely were. Civilian clothes, but their posture betrayed them. Men who had learned discipline the hard way and never quite unlearned it. She recognized them instantly. Time hadn't erased them. It had only rearranged the details. Thompson, Rodriguez, Peterson, the 3 who lived. For a moment no one spoke. 8 years pressed into that silence, dense and unmoving. "We've been looking for you," Thompson said finally. His voice was rougher than she remembered. "After the hospital." "I didn't disappear," Vera replied. "I asked you to let me go." Rodriguez nodded. "You did, and we did." Peterson swallowed. He couldn't stop staring at her scars. "But we never stopped watching," Thompson added. "Never stopped hopping." Something tight loosened in her chest, not relief, not comfort, recognition. Private Kim approached cautiously, still clutching her brother's notebook. She looked between them, sensing the gravity she didn't yet understand. "These are the men," Vera said quietly, "the ones who walked out." Kim bowed her head, a silent thank you passing between strangers bound by the same loss. Behind them, Colonel Mitchell watched without interrupting. He knew better than to step into moments that didn't belong to rank. "We know about Mason," Rodriguez said. "Not at first, but later, things never added up." "You suspected," Vera said. "We suspected," Thompson agreed, "but we had no proof, and you were dead." "Convenient," she murmured. "No," Peterson said suddenly, finding his voice. "Never convenient." The word hung there raw and unpolished. Mitchell approached then, measured. "Captain Vyulov," he said formally. Vera flinched just slightly. "No," she said, "that name stayed in Kandahar." Mitchell nodded. "Then I'll say this plainly. The truth you forced into the open today won't stay contained. There are others, contractors, officers, people who made money on that night." "I know," Vera replied. They all looked at her. "I've been following them," she said simply, "for 8 years." Thompson exhaled slowly. "We thought so." She turned, studying him. "You knew." "We helped," Rodriguez admitted. "When we could, anonymous tips, evidence that appeared in the right hands." "You were my spotters," she said softly. Peterson nodded, even from a distance. The range erupted briefly as a helicopter settled nearby, washing the moment in noise. When it passed, something had shifted. A woman in a tailored suit approached, no uniform, no insignia, but power in every step. "Vera Vyulov," she said, "Deputy Director Chen, JSOC." Vera didn't respond immediately. "We need your testimony," Chen continued, "and your help. Mason's arrest triggered protocols years in the making." "I came here for the truth," Vera said, "not another war." Chen held her gaze. "This one's already happening." She produced a tablet, its screen lighting up with a map. Red markers dotted the country like wounds. "Every one of these locations," Chen said, "matches your travel history, and every one exposed a node in Mason's network." Vera stared. She hadn't seen the pattern, or maybe she had, and refused to name it. "You weren't just shooting," Chen said. "You were mapping corruption." "I was surviving," Vera replied. "Same thing," Thompson said quietly. Chen hesitated, then showed another file. A young man smiled back from the screen. Desert camo, too much hope in his eyes. "Lieutenant Michael Harrison," Chen said, "killed 2 months ago, same intelligence leak." Vera closed her eyes. "How many?" she asked. 18 confirmed, possibly more." The world narrowed again, like it did before a shot. "They didn't stop," Vera said. "No," Chen agreed. "They got comfortable." The old rifle case creaked softly as Vera's grip tightened. "If I do this," she said slowly, "if I step into this world again, I don't wear rank. I don't take orders that hide behind flags." Chen nodded. "You set the terms." Mitchell watched her carefully. He'd seen soldiers return to the fire because they didn't know how to stop burning. 47 names, Rodriguez said. "We've got them, but they're scattering." Vera looked toward the mountains, distant and unmoved. "I need to go home first," she said. "Too dangerous," Thompson objected. "They already know I'm alive," she replied. "They always did." Silence. 48 hours, Chen said finally. "Then we move." Vera nodded. As she climbed into her truck, Kim stepped closer. "My parents," Kim said, "they never believed the report." "The truth won't heal them," Vera said gently, "but it will let them grieve honestly." Kim nodded, tears steady now instead of falling. The engine turned over. The range faded behind her. She drove north, then west, then into land that didn't care who she'd been. 12 hours of road, 12 hours of thought she couldn't outrun. Her cabin waited in the valley like it always had, quiet, watchful. 3 vehicles were already there. She smiled despite herself. Inside, maps covered the walls, photos, names, strings connecting blood to money, 8 years of quiet war. Thompson let out a low whistle. You built this alone. No, Vera said. I survived it alone. They packed through the night, evidence, memory, purpose. At dawn, as the last box was sealed, Vera stood in the empty room, the obsession gone, the silence different now. A radio crackled. Mason's dead, Chen's voice said. Suicide or meant to look like it. Vera closed her eyes. They're cleaning house, Thompson said. No, Vera replied. Someone higher is scared. The hunt wasn't over. It had just learned her name. And this time, she wasn't walking it alone. Why did the room feel colder after the radio went silent? No one moved for several seconds. The mountains outside the cabin were still catching first light, soft gold spilling across pine and stone. But inside, something had hardened. Mason was dead. The man who had finally spoken the truth had been erased before it could fully root itself into the system. Vera set the radio down carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter what little certainty remained. Suicide, Rodriguez said, though his voice carried no belief, in a monitored cell. Peterson shook his head. That wasn't panic, that was cleanup. Vera walked to the window and rested her scarred hand against the glass. Outside, the valley lay quiet, deceptively peaceful. She'd chosen this place because it gave warning before danger arrived, because nothing came here accidentally. This was Anwar's network, she said. They wouldn't burn witnesses this fast, not like this. Thompson looked at her, then who? She didn't answer immediately. She was tracing patterns now the way she always did. Wind before a shot, silence before contact. Someone who doesn't fear courts, she said slowly. Someone who fears exposure. The words settled heavy. Chen's voice came back on the radio, tighter now. We've lost 2 more witnesses in the last 6 hours. Accidents, professional. Someone leaked our list. Peterson swore under his breath. Vera closed her eyes. 8 years of hunting sellers, middlemen, ghosts. She'd never asked who felt safe enough to buy. It's not the network running, Vera said. It's command. Silence followed, not disbelief, calculation. Stars, Thompson said quietly. Yes, Vera replied, or close enough to borrow their gravity. Chen exhaled audibly. We're rerouting you, don't come back to Fort Carson, safe house in Denver, coordinates incoming. No, Vera said. The word was calm, absolute. I go back here first, she continued. Everything I've built is here, you want to finish this, you need it. Chen hesitated. If they know you're alive. They've known for years, Vera interrupted. The hunters they sent didn't come back. That bought me time, this buys us truth. Thompson studied her face, seeing not recklessness, but resolve that had survived fire. I'm going with you, he said. We all are, Rodriguez added. Vera shook her head gently. Not yet. I need to close this place alone. You cover the perimeter. Let me finish packing the past. They didn't argue. Soldiers knew when an order wasn't won. The cabin became quiet again. Vera moved room to room, collecting pieces of 8 years. Financial records, photos, receipts, names scribbled in margins. Every item a breadcrumb, every connection mapped with patience instead of rage. She paused in the back room, the one she rarely entered. Inside, the scars felt louder. She opened a newer rifle case. Modern, precise, not sentimental, insurance she'd once told herself. The old Mason waited nearby, leaning against the wall, unconcerned. Some tools were for memory. Some were for work. Outside, Thompson's voice crackled softly as he coordinated perimeter checks. Drones hummed overhead. Chen had kept her promise. As the sun climbed, Vera stepped outside with the last case and froze. 3 vehicles stood at the tree line, closer than they should have been. Not moving. Watching. Her hand drifted to the rifle without urgency. No spike of fear, just alignment. She studied the vehicles, the spacing, the angles, hunters, yes, but cautious ones. "They're testing," she murmured. A minute passed, then another. Finally, the vehicles backed away, slow, respectful. "They're scared," Peterson said over comms. "They should be," Vera replied. By dusk, they were on the road. Chen rerouted them mid-drive, voice urgent. "Don't come to Denver. New intel, meeting tonight, all remaining players." "Where?" Rodriguez asked. "We don't know," Chen admitted. "Encrypted." "Show me," Vera said. At the safe house, officials crowded around screens glowing with data. Vera leaned in, eyes narrowing. She laughed once, short, bitter. "It's not encryption," she said. "It's Danish." She translated without hesitation, numbers turning into coordinates beneath her pen. "Hunting Lodge," she said. "Wyoming, private airstrip, defensible." The room shifted. "How do you know this?" someone asked. "My father taught them," Vera replied, "before they learned how to betray it." Within an hour, the operation was live. Vera was offered a seat in the command center. She declined. "I'm going in," she said. "They need to see what survived." The flight was quiet, the kind of silence that preceded irreversible moments. As the lodge came into view, Vera checked both rifles, old and new, memory and purpose. The breach was clean, efficient, no unnecessary violence. Inside, men who'd moved money and lives like chess pieces froze as Vera stepped into the light. One recognized her instantly. "You're dead," he whispered. "Reports lie," she replied. Cuffs snapped, rights were read, evidence seized. But Vera's eyes were on a photograph on the wall, her father, younger, smiling beside men who had sold his trust. "He welcomed you," she said softly, "and you burned his lessons for profit." She turned away before they could answer. Outside, under a sky indifferent to justice, Thompson joined her. "It's done," he said. "No," Vera replied, "this is just exposure." 6 months later, the courthouse doors opened and closed behind her for the last time. Convictions stacked, names erased from power. She boarded a plane with 2 rifle cases. One for war, one for truth. As the land fell away beneath her, Vera rested her scarred hand on the old rifle. Some weapons outlived empires. Some survived fire. And sometimes dignity didn't speak. It simply acted. Why did the silence on the plane feel heavier than the firefights she remembered? Vera stared out the window as clouds slid beneath the wing, endless and indifferent. The cabin lights were dimmed, passengers asleep or pretending to be. No one knew who sat among them. No one knew what had just ended or what still hadn't. The old rifle case rested at her feet, the modern one above her head. Old truth. New consequences. For the first time in years, she wasn't listening for pursuit. No phantom engines, no imagined footsteps, just the steady hum of flight and the ache in her scars that came with altitude and memory. She closed her eyes. And Kandahar came back anyway. Not the explosion, not the fire. Those details had been burned into her long ago. What returned now was the waiting. The 3 hours on that ridge when the world narrowed to breath and choice. When she'd known with terrifying clarity that survival wasn't about escape, it was about delay. Delay the enemy. Delay death. Delay truth long enough for someone else to live. She remembered David's voice over the radio, shaky, brave, too young. She remembered promising him she'd tell his sister he wasn't afraid. A promise half made of mercy, half of cowardice. The plane shuddered lightly, a reminder she was moving forward whether she was ready or not. When she landed, Denmark greeted her with gray skis and whined off the sea, cold in a way that felt honest, clean. At the edge of the tarmac, a woman waited. Older now, smaller somehow, wrapped in a coat too thin for the weather. "Mama," Vera said. Her mother didn't answer. She simply stepped forward and pulled Vera into her arms, careful not to touch the worst of the scars, as if memory itself might still hurt her daughter. They stood there longer than was comfortable for the watching world. "You came home," her mother finally whispered. "Yes," Vera said, "I did." The house was exactly as she remembered. The creak in the stairs, the faded photograph of her father by the door, rifle slung casually, smile easy and unguarded. A man who believed allies were chosen by shared values, not convenience. At the kitchen table, tea steamed between them. "They told me you were dead," her mother said quietly, "but I never believed it." "I know. Why didn't you write?" Vera looked at her hands, scarred, capable, still hers. "Because I didn't know how to be your daughter anymore," she said. "Only a weapon." Her mother reached across the table and took her hand without hesitation, without fear. "Then learn again," she said. "Weapons can be set down." That night Vera couldn't sleep. She walked the old paths behind the house, boots crunching over gravel and frost. At the edge of the property stood a small shed, its door weathered but locked. Inside waited her father's rifle. She opened the case slowly, reverently, different from the Mosin, lighter, balanced for teaching, not war. She remembered his hands guiding hers, his voice correcting without judgment. "Accuracy isn't about force," he'd told her. "It's about honesty." She sat there for a long time, the weight of lineage pressing gently instead of crushing. Weeks passed. The world moved on, or pretended to. Headlines faded, names were replaced, but in quieter rooms people still spoke of the trials, of admirals who avoided eye contact, of officers who learned that rank did not erase consequence. Vera testified when required. She spoke plainly, no theatrics, no rage. Truth didn't need volume. In the courtroom, she watched faces shift, not with guilt, but with recognition. The understanding that the system they trusted had survived only because someone broken had refused to stay silent. After the last day, as she stepped outside into thin winter sunlight, Thompson was waiting. "You look different," he said. "I slept," she replied. "That helps." He smiled faintly. "We're standing up a new program." "I know. Teaching counterintelligence," he continued. "Pattern recognition, financial trails, the quiet work." Vera nodded. "The work that prevents names from being carved into stone." "Will you help?" She didn't answer immediately. That night she returned to the shed. She laid the 3 rifles side by side on the table. Her grandfather's war. Her father's peace. Her own long reckoning. She understood then that none of them were meant to be worshipped. They were meant to be understood, and eventually released. "I'll help," she said the next morning, "but on my terms." Months later she stood on a different range. Not military, not civilian, somewhere in between. A group of young analysts watched her with open curiosity. Not all, not skepticism. Potential. She placed the Mosin on the bench. Some smiled, a few frowned. "Why that one?" someone asked. Vera met their eyes. "Because you will underestimate it," she said, "and that's the lesson." She didn't fire that day. She talked instead, about patience, about reading what people didn't say, about how corruption left signatures just like wind left fingerprints on grass. "Most failures aren't loud," she told them. "They whisper. Learn to hear whispers." At night she returned home, not to Montana, not fully to Denmark. To a place that felt provisional, honest. Sometimes the scars burned, sometimes the memories surged. But they no longer owned her. One evening a message arrived on her phone, A single photograph. A rifle range sign, newly installed. VULOV Rain. Dedicated to precision, integrity, and accountability. She stared at it for a long time. Then she put the phone away. Because monuments weren't the point. The point was the quiet moments when someone chose not to betray, when someone asked why, when someone refused the easy path. Late that night, she cleaned the Mosin one last time, slow, methodical. She closed the case and stored it carefully, not hidden, not displayed. Resting. Outside, wind moved through the trees. Somewhere far away, a system adjusted, learning slowly how to live with its scars. Vera stepped onto the porch, breathing in the cold. For the first time since Kandahar, she didn't feel like she was waiting. She felt like she was choosing. And sometimes, redemption doesn't arrive as forgiveness. Sometimes it arrives as responsibility, accepted quietly, carried forward, and never used to harm again. Why did she wake before dawn, even when no one was chasing her anymore? The habit lingered. Not fear, awareness. Vera stood at the window as the world shifted from black to gray, then slowly toward light. Somewhere beyond the hills, a city was waking. Somewhere else, a young soldier would lace boots for the first time, believing the system would protect them. She hoped it would. But hope, she'd learned, needed guardians. The training program grew quietly. No banners, no speeches. Analysts, operators, auditors, people whose names would never be known outside small rooms with locked doors. She taught them how to read absence, how to notice when silence was purchased, how to follow money the way hunters followed tracks, not rushing, not guessing. Truth doesn't sprint, she told them. It waits for the careless. They listened. Not because of her scars, not because of her story, but because everything she taught was grounded, precise, unglamorous, and effective. At night, when the building emptied and the lights dimmed, Vera stayed behind. She reviewed cases, corrected assumptions. Sometimes she simply sat, letting stillness settle around her without tension. The ghosts came less often now. When they did, they weren't screaming. They were watching. David. The ridge. The men who lived. The ones who didn't. She carried them differently now, not as weight but as orientation. North on a compass she trusted. One evening, a young analyst lingered after class. "Why didn't you keep the rank?" he asked, nervous but sincere. Vera considered him carefully. "Because rank can become a shield," she said. "And shields block sight. I need to see clearly." He nodded, not fully understanding yet, but someday he would. That was how it worked. Lessons arrived when readiness caught up. On her last day of that rotation, Vera returned to the range alone. The Vulov range. The sign stood clean and understated. No statues, no heroic silhouettes, just a name and 3 words carved into steel. Precision. Integrity. Accountability. She carried only one rifle with her. The old one. She laid out a single target, not far, not challenging, not symbolic. Just honest distance. The morning air moved gently across the field. Grass bent, then straightened. Vera watched it, smiling faintly. Some habits didn't need unlearning. She fired one round. Clean, centered, final. She didn't fire again. Instead, she cleared the rifle, packed it carefully, and sat on the bench for a long while. No audience, no witnesses. Just a woman and the tool that had carried her through fire, silence, and truth. She thought of her grandfather in winter. Her father teaching patience. Herself kneeling on a ridge, choosing others over escape. All different wars. All requiring the same thing. Resolve without noise. When she finally stood, she locked the case and handed it to the range master. "Keep it," she said, "for teaching, not for use." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" Yes, some weapons earned rest. That night Vera boarded another plane, not for pursuit, not for confrontation, just movement, forward. As the lights dimmed and the engine hum steadied, she placed her hand on the armrest, scars catching faint reflections from the window. They no longer burned. They reminded. Outside, the world stretched vast and imperfect and unfinished. And somewhere, quietly, systems adjusted. People asked better questions. Protocols changed before damage was done. Names never made it onto memorial walls because betrayal had been interrupted early. No headlines marked those moments. But lives continued. Vera closed her eyes. She wasn't a ghost anymore. Not a weapon. Not a symbol. Just a woman who had learned that strength didn't announce itself, and dignity didn't demand recognition. Sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is not vengeance. It's precision. It's patience. It's refusing to let the lie survive. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.